And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook. It is Wednesday, April 17th, and our outlook will go for Thursday and Friday. But checking the sea ice on this Wednesday afternoon, well, we have had some of a retreat take place since late this past weekend and early in the week, and also some melting as temperatures have risen above freezing along the coastlines of the southwest. And we are watching a front that's just kind of stationary on the east side of it. Winds are more out of the east-southeast. On the back side of it, winds are more northwesterly, and that'll show up here as we get into the actual marine forecast for the various sectors of the state. But certainly we are seeing the ice really melt off now in Upper Cook Inlet. It's been quite mild the past few days, and mild weather will continue with daytime highs in the 40s to near 50 degrees in areas surrounding Cook Inlet, so that'll continue to be the case. So we have late tonight into early on Thursday morning, low pressure splitting. We have a piece of energy riding up along the stationary front along the west side of the state. There's still a few areas of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings, including the eastern Aleutians and then the lower Yukon Delta areas of the Seward Peninsula and the Noatak Valley could still pick up some measurable snow and some blowing snow. But we are looking for the most unsettled weather to remain along this front here along the west side of the state, whereas big high pressure over northwest Canada is bringing clear skies, warmer daytime temperatures to the Panhandle, as well as the eastern mainland, enjoying temperatures, afternoon temperatures in the 50s, even some lower 60s showing up now, and that'll be the case here through the end of the week. So by Thursday afternoon, we have a low just kind of sits and spins here, piece of energy riding north from tonight into the day tomorrow, be working its way up along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and the Bering Strait. And then by Friday afternoon, this front just kind of washes out as a trough because there's not a big temperature difference either side. And the front that's lifting northeastward into the Gulf will just kind of begin to diminish, become more of a trough, and could spread some light showers along the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle this weekend, especially as we get into later Saturday and Sunday, but it will by no means be a major system. This high will relax a little bit, but still provide very sunny and warm weather here across the eastern mainland and the Panhandle for Friday afternoon. So looking at the marine forecast, nearshore waters here within the inner channels, north winds 10-15 knots, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, waves running 2-3 feet. Southeast winds to 10 knots, Dixon Entrance, Ketchikan, Metlakatla with waves a couple of feet. Outer coast winds generally southeast 15 to 20 knots, swells 7 to 8, 9 feet, though 10 to 14 feet outside of Gustavus, Yakutat Bay, and over toward Cape Suckling. For Friday, we're looking for offshore flow here. North winds 20 knots, Lynn Canal 3-4 foot waves. Northeast winds 20 knots with waves 3-4 feet within Stevens Passage. Southeast winds to 15 knots there in Dixon Entrance, 3 foot waves. And then generally southeast winds along the outer coast right around 15-20 knots with swells of 8 to maybe as high as 10-11 feet outside of Yakutat Bay and again over toward Cape Suckling. Strongest winds, though, will be across the entrance here of Cook Inlet. Kennedy entrance here, we're looking at 40 to 45 knot easterly gales, swells as high as 18 feet off of Kodiak Island. Easterly gales to 40 knots along the eastern Kenai, 20 knot winds within the wider expanse of Prince William Sound with 4 foot waves, and then we're looking at 4 to 6 foot waves Upper Cook Inlet at 25 knots. For Friday, winds come down a bit, still 35 knot easterly gales there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with 10 foot swells or so. East-northeast winds 15-20 knots, Prince William Sound, Upper Cook Inlet waves a couple few feet there. Alaska Peninsula, and for Kodiak Island, look for northeast gales to 35 knots within Shelikof Strait. Some of the strongest winds will be there just to the north across Kamishak Bay into Lake Iliamna region. And as we trail out down along the Alaska Peninsula, north winds to 30 knots there, Cold Pass, or False Pass, Cold Bay. Waves as high as 14 feet there to the north and west of Cold Bay. And for Friday, winds will still be east-northeast, 25 to 30 knots in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, so down a little bit. And then along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, look for east to northeast winds, 15 to 20 knots, waves 4 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side, and 2 to as high as 7 feet north of Cold Bay. Strongest winds Thursday will be eastern Aleutians. Look for 35 to 40 knot northwesterly winds on the backside of that low and front, including Unalaska and Nikolsky. Further west, winds kind of go northwest at 25 knots and then turn a bit more west and southwesterly at around 15 knots, western half of the Aleutians. And then for Friday, still a gradient holds up with northwest winds to 30 knots across the eastern Aleutians, but becoming variable around 10 knots west of Adak. Along the southwest coast, we have northeast to north winds out of Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, 20-25 knots, 30-knot north winds at St. Paul, and then winds will be offshore southeasterly to 20 knots because of that front draped in this region inside of Norton Sound, but northwesterly to 25 knots along the lower Yukon Delta through Etolan Strait. And for Friday, look for pretty much offshore winds off the mainland, east winds out of Norton Sound, as well as the Yukon Delta at 15 knots, northeast winds 15 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay, north winds to 30 knots still in the vicinity of the Pribilov Islands at St. Paul with swells as high as 8 to 9 feet. Across the Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait, look for east-northeast winds 25 knots. As we go up along the northwest coast, northeast winds 25 knots, and then more easterly along the Arctic coast during the day Thursday. Still ice in place, and there'll be some areas of mainly light snow, a little blowing snow as well. For Friday, still east winds around 20 knots along the Arctic coast, falling off to southeasterly around 15 knots through the lower Chukchi Sea coastline, and then as we drop down through the Bering Strait, we expect north winds to 15 knots along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and the north side of St. Lawrence Island.